Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to do a monthly wrap-up. So the month of July was very interesting for me. I did do a couple of different genres. I did a couple of horror books, which is quite nice, and tried to explore and expand the types of books that I read. And I kind of still wanted to talk about it. I don't usually film wrap-ups because I feel like it's putting pressure on myself to read a lot of books because I want to film a wrap-up. So does a TBR. But I feel good this month, and it might not be a monthly thing, but I'll try. And you know what? If I only read 2 books that month, I don't care. I can just talk for 20 minutes straight about those 2 books. I'm just gonna base this off my Goodreads list, because as soon as I finish a book, I do put it on Goodreads immediately, so that I have like a tally of how many books I've read, which is nice to get me a bit more organized. So for the month of July, I've read 10 books. And the first one is The Familiar. So I used an audiobook version of this, and I stand by what I think what I said in the previous vlog that I posted about how kind of disappointed I was. Again, I'm not really a previous fan of Leigh Bardugo. I've not really read Shadow and Bone or Six of Crows at all, but I have watched a series and a lot of people have been kind of raving about her. It just felt flat. Like it fell flat, and it bored me to death, and honestly I just kind of wanted it to be over. So maybe if I do want something, like if I do want to try another Leigh Bardugo book, I might need to read the actual famous ones that everybody's talking about, like Six of Crows or Shadow and Bone. But yeah, I gave it a 3 stars, but I think I'm still a bit generous about that because I might change, like after having, because it was part of a book club and having discussed this with a lot of people and their opinions about it, I think I'm gonna bump it down to 2.5 stars. It was just not really a thing. It's not memorable. All I remember from it was that there was this competition, and what's her name again? I can't even remember. I'm really bad at names anyway, but I can't really remember the main character's name. Lucia? Yeah, so we start with a maid named Lucia who has a bit of magic, and then some people found out and they wanted to use it to get in favor with the king. So she entered into this competition, which was kind of majority of the book, and then everything was rushed at the very end. Like it almost like the magic system was a bit confusing as well, because like the book title is The Familiar, but then he's the first of his kind, so what does the familiar mean technically? I think some of the people in the book club did discuss this, and it was just a bit confusing. Anyway, I stand by what I said. It's a 2.5 stars. It's not really that memorable. It's not that book of like, you know, this is the book that you should read from Leigh Bardugo. I don't think so. And I'm sorry for anyone who really enjoyed that, but for me personally, it didn't work for me. But again, I always say what works for me might not work for you, and what works for you might not work for me. So, you know, bucket of salt, a pinch of salt when you hear my reviews. And that's the first book that I read. And then the second book that I read in July was The Warm Hands of Ghost. Now, The Warm Hands of Ghost is by Katherine Arden, and it takes place in World War I, and we get a nurse named, see, I'm really bad at names, I'm sorry, Laura Ivan. And she is a combat nurse, but then she was medically discharged and she came back to Canada. But then when she was there, she received a package of all her brother's items. Her brother was serving at the war at that time. I think he was down in the trenches, like he was actually in like the front lines. Both of his dog tags were there, which kind of makes Laura feel like he's not dead. They've not found his body, so he's missing. It's this journey for herself to go back into the front lines where she did get injured, and then just confront the demon that's lurking in kind of the ground zero of war, like trying to seduce soldiers. It has magical realism in it, which is great, and I really kind of enjoyed the bit where Laura is explaining about being a nurse and the brutality of war. Personally myself, I am a nurse, so I kind of resonated a bit with Laura, but not that I've been through war, but it's like a lot of people found, like reading other people's reviews and hearing other people talk about it, they didn't really relate to the main character because Laura can be so stoic, and sometimes like horrible things happen and she just goes on with her job, and it's kind of the reality of being part of a medical profession, especially in the face of something so horrible like that. I did mention this in the previous book review. I've talked about wherein it medical professionals or any other professionals that have to deal with a lot of horrible things, they have to kind of compartmentalize, and it's there to help them kind of deal with the reality of what they're facing. But besides that, the issue I had with this book is that the theology of it. So basically, there's a bit where the magical realism at the very end did become a bit more questionable, in my opinion. Like, there was a demon. No, he wasn't a demon. He's basically the devil. But then nobody then acknowledged it. Like, you are in the midst of war, but then there's some supernatural being, but nobody really talked about it. Like, they were whispering about it and then saying like, oh, this guy, he does this and does that and offers you an amazing night. But then our main characters who have encountered this being has never really discussed it, and I really hated the fact that at the very end, like, Laura had plot armor, which basically is just like, oh, come on, like, it's too easy for her to just walk into the Devil's Lair, grab her brother, and leave. Sorry, I know I've never mentioned it in the very beginning of this, but it is gonna be a spoilery, TBR thing. So not TBR, kind of wrap up, because I want to talk about the main points of the stories that actually kind of resonated and not resonated with me. So I don't think I mentioned it, but I did give this a 3-star. The Warm Hands of Ghosts, and I'm sticking by that review. The next book that I read was Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. Now, this is a novella. It's a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, and I remember I listened to this on Audible, by the way, but I remember listening to it while doing chores, and it was just this whole different kind of experience. Like, T. Kingfisher has a way of writing that you just feel like you're teleported to that specific place. And I know it might work for me and it might not work for you. Some people love T. Kingfisher's writing like me, and some people just don't really gel with it, and that's absolutely fine, to each their own. But for me, it really transported me to that place. Like, it's a short, I think it only lasted for 6 hours or 5 hours. I think I was listening to it in like 2.6 speed or something. But it was really, really fun. It took the story of Sleeping Beauty and turned it like in a very unique way, that it wasn't even in the perspective of Beauty, of, what is her name, Belle? I don't know, like, of Beauty, the princess. No, it took that perspective of a different character, a character that was not in the fairy tales, I think, but it was in the perspective of a frog, a toad, which is funny enough, I'm very terrified of frogs. But it was in her perspective, and she's basically a fae folk. So her name is it her name Toad or something? Toadling. Yeah. So her name's Toadling. We go through her life and how she ends up with the family or the kingdom where Sleeping Beauty is. And then she's not one of the fairies that bless Sleeping Beauty with all these gifts and other things, but she's one of the keepers, or like, I think she was trying to bless her with something, but it all went wrong. And then basically Beauty is a changeling, and then she was supposed to be there to put like a spell, or it was not curse, it was a spell on Beauty to kind of mitigate her powers, but it all went wrong because she was a newbie. She kind of trapped herself in that tower along with Beauty to keep this changeling from destroying the world, basically. And I really love the pacing of it, and how T. Kingfisher really took her time to describe how the changing of time happens through the lens of someone who's basically immortal. Toadling's immortal. She talks about like the plague happening, and then different types of people happening, and then for the first time she's seen people with different skin tones, and the Age of Dragon and something like that. And it was really, really magical, and it really like just transported you to that place in time, and which is nice. I really loved it, and I gave it a 5-star. It was one of my favorites of T. Kingfisher, and highly recommend. The next book that I read, which I think I read on Kindle, is The Haar by David Sodergren. And I have got to say, amazing. I think I gave it 5 stars. Our main character is named Muriel Macaulay, Mrs. Macaulay. And she lives in a rural area in Scotland, which is basically, I think she lives in the coastal area of Scotland. And someone, a billionaire, a American billionaire, wants to buy the land and turn it into a golf course. And basically we get Muriel and a couple of people from the coastal town not wanting to budge, not wanting to give up their land. They're old, they want to die there. That's where kind of the conflict happens. It's a nice thing that we get a perspective of someone who is a different age group. Someone who's 85. I think Muriel's 85. So she doesn't want to give up her land. This billionaire wants to buy it. There was construction already happening around her, and she knows that their time is up. Like, he's not going to offer any more money, and they'll just take it by force. This Haar came into the beach, and basically that's when all the horrors happened. And I highly, highly recommend this. It actually gave me a lot of other emotions. It wasn't just fear. I felt scared. I felt sad. I felt happy. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me kind of feel so many emotions, and it was so well rounded. Like, I don't read a lot of horror, but for me, if a book can make you feel so many emotions in its story, then it's a good book. It's a well-rounded book. You fell in love with the characters. You cared for the characters. You cried for the characters. You laughed with the characters. It was really, really good, and I would highly recommend it. And I think the author is Scottish, and I think he's also independently published, so I support that 100%. So I highly recommend The Haar. The next book I read, which I physically own, is The Book of Gothel by Mary McMyne. It's another retelling. Again, I think I was in a really good retelling mood in July, and I still am today. It's about Gothel and her kind of origin story. So the Book of Gothel focuses on basically Mother Gothel's story. It takes the, amazing, wonderful story of Rapunzel, but we focus on the villain of that story. And it's a beautiful retelling because it's rich, it has a lot of characters, it has a lot of heart, but it also focuses on motherhood and how being a mother influences all our decisions and all our sacrifices basically for our children. Here we have Helwise, which is it Helwise? Yeah. So Helwise, she is our main character, and she is basically Gothel. But Gothel isn't like a person here in this book. Gothel is a tower. So basically Helwise of Gothel is where it comes from. She is the daughter of a midwife, and she is also training or being an apprentice of a midwife. But her mother dies, and then she has these fainting spells. I think it was kind of like she has migraines or epilepsy or something like that. She's seen as a witch, basically, in her small village. And when the blight happened in the village, and I think a plague happened in the village, they all blamed it on her. So she had to run away when her mother died. And she went to the Tower of Gothel, or the House of Gothel. And that's kind of where we find out that she has her own kind of abilities, and she can do a lot of healing. She can transfer her soul into creatures, which is quite cool. It was really nice. It was really vivid. It was really character driven. But the only problem I had with this book is that like the plot just kept going on to different directions. Like the plot just branched out so many times that I think it lost me a wee bit. Like it lost me at the very end, like near the end, where like you think that the plot was to prevent this woman from dying, but then she dies anyway, and then that one's in danger, and then save the child, and then it sums it all up at the end, like how it's connected to Rapunzel, and then how Rapunzel managed to escape actually. She didn't escape, she just left. But yeah, it's a really nice book, and I think I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, it was really, it was a cozy read in a way as well. Like if you like kind of the stakes are not too high, but they're not too low as well. It's like a middle, and you're not too bothered by like multiple plot points like just bouncing around, then I think you'll enjoy this as well. I don't know why I think I'm coming down with a cold or something. The next book I've read, which I also have physically, is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher, which is this the second book that I've read from T. Kingfisher in this month? But we start with our character Mona, and she is a wizard basically. She has her ability to put magic into bread, put magic into baking, and it was such a fun time. It's what you would expect from a T. Kingfisher book if you've not read one already. You get the whimsy, you get magic, you get incredible world building, but it's not to the point where it's exhausting world building. It's just cozy. And I remember reading Nettle and Bone a couple of years ago, and I just really love how nonchalant T. Kingfisher's writings are. Like she'll say, oh, a basilisk is trapped into a rooster. No, is it a hen? You can't put it in a rooster. No, if you put a demon into a rooster, it becomes a basilisk. That's why you put a demon into a hen. And it's like just simple explanation, no other world building, like no other thing to add on to that, but it's just good, and it's what you need sometimes. Like you just want a nice, cozy, fun fantasy. And I really like this because Mona, at the very beginning of this book, the very first sentence was, there was a dead girl in my aunt's bakery. That's the very first sentence. And it's just like, way to start a sentence, way to start a book. Mona kind of finds herself being blamed for this murder, and then suddenly someone's out there trying to kill the people who have magic, and she's there to try to figure out why this is happening, who the assassin is. And I highly recommend this. It was really fun, and I think I gave this 5 stars. So yeah, the next book that I've listened to is Bryony and Roses by T. Kingfisher again. And this one is about a retelling about Beauty and the Beast, which is not really my cup of tea. I really don't personally like the story of Beauty and the Beast. And this one, even though it's a retelling, it didn't really lit up any fires in me, or didn't really kind of make me fall in love with that retelling or that story in general, or in the original story. And it was meh. It was okay. I think I gave this 3 stars, and we have Bryony, who was going home, and it was a snowstorm, and then she got trapped in the middle of a snowstorm, so she kind of found this castle, and then she took shelter in it, and that's when she found roses, which were not in season because it was in the middle of a snowstorm, but I think she picked one up, and then that's when she's finally like trapped into this curse. Of course, Beast is there, and then they just you just get the ending where they solve the mystery and defeat the bad guy. And it was just so plain. And I gave this a 3 stars, but I think I'm being generous. I think I'm gonna have to put it down to 2.5. I'm really sorry. I really love T. Kingfisher's writing, and I really love retellings, but this time it was not it. And it's no fault of the author or the way she wrote it. It's just I'm not really a big fan of Beauty and the Beast, and I actually don't know why I picked this one. I thought maybe, you know, might as well try another T. Kingfisher that's free on Audible. So I did that, and I didn't really enjoy it. It was fine. It did what it needed to do, which was entertain me while I was packing up for a holiday. So yeah, 2.5 stars for that one. The next one I read was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. I think it's romantasy, and I think it's one of the first ones that I've read, like the ones that are officially named romantasy. We have our main character named Elspeth, and oh, that's where you are. Almost thought I lost you. Our main character named Elspeth, and she has this kind of, she's possessed by a demon, and the world where she is, they have these cards called the Providence cards. Is it? Yeah, the Providence cards. Those Providence cards give you powers. So the king gives these Providence cards to the people who have influence in his court. They use it. Some of them make them beautiful. Some of them make them able to control you with their mind. Some of them can read your mind, some of them can make you invisible, and all that jazz. The catch of this book is that surrounding them, the origins of the Providence Guards is basically the spirits of the woods. And because the Providence Guard was created, I think in retaliation, the woods kind of was cursed and surrounded by this fog. And once you've been infected when you were a child, you kind of get special powers, and when you do, you get kind of like inquisitors, and then they just snatch you up and then off you. So I really liked the story, the premise, the plot, and the world building. It was really good, and a funny thing, I really liked the romance at the very beginning because it was fake dating, but I kind of ended up falling for a secondary character, Elm, and he's just my favorite. I think for me, I'm a bit pained because this ended in a cliffhanger. I really just want to know what happens next, but I can't get the book yet. I think I'm just gonna go for a paperback because this one's the Fairy Loot edition, and I know I can't afford another Fairy Loot edition of this, so I'm just gonna go for a paperback. But again, I gave this 5 stars because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed the romance, and if you're looking for a book that's kind of like fantasy, high stakes, but not so overly complex plot and really nice characters, highly recommend this. It gave me Once Upon a Broken Heart vibes, but it was more darker. Again, Once Upon a Broken Heart is more of like a fairy tale light feeling when I read it. This one really just is, you just feel it, like it's dark and gothic, and I really love that, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I gave it 5 stars. So yeah. The next book I read, which I don't have the physical copy anymore because I did borrow it from my library, was Carrie by Stephen King. And it was the first ever book that I've ever read from Stephen King, and I think it's his first published book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was an amazing kind of way of diving into what the hype is all about Stephen King, because I've never really read any of his books, but a lot of people have been raving about, a lot of people have collections of his books, and he has a lot of books published out. But for me, it was the way it was written. It was kind of like we had different perspectives of people, and then there's different like scientific papers and newspapers and articles, and I think court records of what happened the night when shit hit the fan, and prom night. And it was really, really great. It was constructed really well, and I just felt like, I think it was, I don't know when it was published, I think it was in the 1970s, or it was set in the 1970s, and how emotionally mature people were. Some of them were idiots, again, high school, but some of the characters were really emotionally mature. So I think I've not said this yet, but if you've not read Carrie yet, it's about our girl Carrie, who is basically has this telekinesis power, and she gets invited in the prom by like the popular kid named Tommy Ross. So Tommy Ross takes her to the prom, and then all hell breaks loose, basically. The summary sounds so simple, but it was layered by so many things, like Carrie's abusive mother, the way she had to go through that every day, like the different characters that just have these kind of richness to them. And I see how people tell me, like, if you like rich characters, Stephen King is a really good author in making you feel for characters and making them real and human, which is really good, because that's what you need when you read books. You know, you don't want to keep reading books that have like overly manicured and perfect characters. You need characters that are just assholes, and it's the reality of the world. And I think that was very effective, and I cannot wait to read more Stephen King. Okay, the battery died, so I just have to do this really quick. I really enjoyed Stephen King, 5 stars for me. It was really effective, and someone gave me more Stephen King, which I'm very excited to read. The next book, the final book actually that I want to talk about, that I've read at the end of, like, I think finished at the 31st. I finished it in like 2 hours or something, or 3 hours. The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. And everybody already knows this book. Everyone that I've talked to basically knows this book. But we have Arthur Kip, our main character, who is a junior solicitor in London, and he has to go attend to some business in, like, basically in northern England, I think. It's to attend someone's funeral. It's Mrs. Drablow's funeral, and she is the sole inhabitant of Eel Marsh House. And basically the house is haunted by this woman in black. It was an amazing experience for me. It was too terrifying for me, actually. It's one of the books that have physically made me so scared that I had to run out the house. And you know, fair, you think I'm silly, but I did really, there's a vlog coming up on why I felt so scared. But I have paired this with the audiobook, which is currently free on Audible if you're a member, and it is Dolby, so you have like surround sound and you get the sound effects. And basically I read this in a cottage where I was home alone because everybody had to go somewhere, and I decided to opt out from that trip, and I just stayed and read this book, which made it a very different experience for myself. It was a strange house. It was huge land as well, so I didn't really have neighbors around me. And it was next to a lake, and I was reading it on one of the most beautiful days that I've ever seen in Scotland. And this book scared the living daylights out of me, basically, and it is 5 stars. Reading this with the accompaniment of the audiobook is a whole different experience. It made me feel terrified. I was so terrified. I was so jumpy at the end of it as well. Like, the whole day I was just so jumpy. And yeah, 5 stars for this. Highly recommend. with the audiobook as well. And yeah, I think that's all the books that I have for this wrap up, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, thank you so much for everyone who's subscribed already. I think I'm almost close to like 150 subscribers, which is kind of insane for me. And yeah, so if you like this video, please subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a like if you like it. And if you want to help me out with the algorithm, post a comment. Any comment will do, even an emoji. And I'll see you again next time. And yeah, hopefully this August I'll have an amazing reading month as well, because for me, 10 books in a month, having a full-time job, 12-hour shifts, is mind-blowing. I don't know, like, it helped a lot having audiobooks, but just anything consuming books is good, and I'm happy about that. And yeah, see you again next time. Bye.